This is the Sports Hit List. By the fans, for the fans.
Carl Coulange for the Sports Hit List, by the fans and for the fans. I'm joined by a very special guest, New York Times bestselling author, Mr. Jeff Pearlman. Jeff, thank you for joining me.
I'm just happy when anyone calls me special. So I'll take it. Nobody ever does. That's good.
We also have our Hit List contributors, Mr. Anthony Mullen. Anthony, how you doing, sir?
Hey, how you doing?
And the resident coach is in the building. Coach, how you doing?
Doing great, man. Can't complain. Jeff came on and complimented me on my background. For a lot of people who don't know, that's one of my favorite places in the world, Rome, Italy. Love it there. Ciao, ragazzi.
So Jeff's new book, Three Ring Circus, Shaq, Kobe, Phil, and the crazy years of the LA Lakers Dynasty just released. Jeff, how does it feel for the book to finally be out?
I imagine my wife would hate me for saying this because she would say, you don't understand what pain is. But I would say it's kind of like giving birth, where, you're like, you've been nurturing this thing and you have this thing and you want to put it out there and you're working and it's uncomfortable and then it's out there and it's kind of a relief, and it's a relief, I guess it feels good. It's a relief.
What inspired you to
say that? Women are not gonna like to hear that.
Not gonna go over well.
What inspired you to write this book, and how long did it take you?
It took me about 2 years total to report and write it. I wrote a book years ago called Showtime about the 80s Lakers of Magic and Kareem. And I find the Lakers a really interesting organization to write about. It's big and interesting and exciting. And I remember growing up in New York and when they would zoom in on the Forum and you see the palm trees and the Laker girls and the coastline, and you just be like, there's something about it that's magical. And I always thought Shaq, Kobe, huge characters, Phil Jackson, huge character, a lot of winning. And it just rekindled that sort of being a kid and loving something that sparked the Lakers have. So kind of made for a good subject, I thought.
Did you grow up a Lakers fan?
I actually was a sad, lowly, and pathetic New Jersey Nets fan. So when I was a kid, my favorite player by far, if I were a Laker fan, my favorite player would have been Magic Johnson. But I was a Net fan, and my favorite player was Pearl Washington. So.
Okay.
Oh, Pearl.
Yeah. Great player.
New York roots. Syracuse
Boys and Girls High School.
Yeah. Boys and Girls High School. Yes, sir.
I graduated from there.
Jeff.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
Jeff, as much as I love you have to be on my show, it pains me for you to hear you say those things because I'm a Celtics fan. So I'm sitting here cringing like, yes, I appreciate you being, but I'm a Celtics fan, Paul Pierce guy. It's tough. It's hard. It's hard for me right now.
Nobody has it more tough than me. Lifelong Knicks fan. Born and raised lifelong Knicks fan. Nobody has it worse than me.
I would argue that I have it harder than you because I'm a lifelong New York Jets fan.
Oh.
Okay. You got trump card. Ace of spades right there.
Yeah, Ace of spades. Indeed. Big joker.
Yeah, I win that one. I win for losing. Yeah.
Anthony, did you have a question?
Oh, yes. Also, so you do a lot of interviews. Do you plan on doing 1,000 interviews this time around?
I always try. It's not about, you don't set out and say, how many people can I interview? You just keep calling until you run out of time. So it's actually, I'm working on a new book now, and it's a biography of Bo Jackson, who was one of my favorite athletes growing up. And the problem, so NBA rosters are smallish compared to other leagues, and so you have a finite number of people you can actually call because after a while you run out. The beauty of Bo Jackson, in a way, is by playing football and baseball, there's just an absolute ton of people. I've said to a friend recently, I could see Bo Jackson being my first 1,000 interview book. I wrote a Walter Payton biography. Yeah. I approached 700 interviews, which is very high for me. But I could see Bo Jackson being 1,000 interview book, it's kind of a
number. Would you write about Kobe?
Say that again?
Would you write about Kobe?
There was a really good Kobe biography that came out a few years ago called Showboat by a guy named Roland Lazenby, and it was actually really good. So I feel like if the turf is already covered specifically, I probably don't want to do it again, as someone else. So probably not.
I grew up a lifelong Lakers fan, so I definitely enjoyed the book. I didn't like, how you laid it on thick on Kobe, but it was definitely fair, I would say.
I don't know. Well, that's one thing I've been talking about a lot. The book was completed before Kobe died. And Yeah, and it was the whole promoting of the book is kind of uncomfortable because, like, I mean, you are correct. Like, if you're a diehard Kobe fan, there are definitely things in the book that are uncomfortable, and his passing makes it even more uncomfortable because all of a sudden, when you talk about Eagle, Colorado, as an example, and what happened in Eagle, you're not just talking about a guy who's alive and can defend himself. You're talking about someone who passed, and I don't know. You know, it sucks. Everything sucks about it.
I understand.
I think that's a part of why books are written, though. Books are historical references. And even though people pass away, we have certain versions, and everybody with the internet now can go back and make their own version and come up with what they think after reading, your words. But to follow up on Anthony's question, with the Lakers, what is one of the most, I don't want to say, because sometimes you can't really say the stories that nobody will believe, but following a team of that nature, what is one thing that you wrote in your book that people wouldn't believe unless you wrote it down?
All right, so it's kind of funny because people, they see the book and they say, Shaq, Kobe, blah, blah, blah. My favorite character in the book by far is, do you guys remember J.R. Ryder?
Of course.
Yes.
Funk, J.R. Ryder.
Yeah.
I love J.R. Ryder. And he was on the team just 1 year. And it was 2000, 2001. He was a fringe player on those teams. And so first, J.R. Ryder is kind of infamous in the journalism world for threatening reporters every now and then. Like that season, a writer named Tim Brown wrote something that J.R. did not like. And one day J.R. Ryder walks up to him and says, "Are you Tim Brown?" And he goes, "Yeah." He goes, "I know where your family lives." And then just walked away. Like he was that kind of guy. So I wanted to interview J.R. Ryder, but all I had was an address, and he lived in Arizona. So I drove to Arizona and knocked on his door. And one morning I just knocked on his door, and a little kid answers the door, and I'm like, "Hey, my name's Jeff Pearlman, and I'm trying to find J.R. Ryder." And he goes, "Hold on." Then a woman comes to the door, and I'm like, "Hey, my name's Jeff. I'm looking for J.R. Ryder. I'm a reporter." "Hold on." The door closes. I hear arguing behind the scenes, like, J.R. Ryder walks to the door. "Who are you?" I'm like, "Hey, my name's Jeff Pearlman. I'm a writer." And I hold up a book I wrote. And I'm like, "I'm working on a book about the Lakers." He goes, No way, man. No, bro. You don't just show up at someone's door. Bro, you just knock on my door. Bro, you effing kidding me? Bro, no. Then he opens the door and he comes out. "Bro, I'm just saying, bro. No, you don't do that. You don't do that." "What's that book you have?" "It's a book I wrote about the USFL. But is that the Trump League?" I'm like, "Yeah." "So what are you working on?" "I'm doing a book about the Shaq Kobe years." "All right, man, I'll talk to you. And he's amazing. Like his year with the Lakers, just as one example of what he was and how kind of, up and down he was. He missed 3 practices. It was either 2 or 3 in a row because his car broke down. But he lived 300 yards from the practice facility. Like, I love that. He also, he overslept.
NBA, baby.
He overslept a practice one time. And he overslept the practice. And he had the front desk clerk at the hotel, the Road Hotel, write a note to Phil Jackson, the coach, saying, "Dear coach, we forgot to give JR a wake-up call. That is why he is late. Sincerely, Pete, Grand Hyatt front desk." And like brings it to Phil Jackson. And Phil Jackson's like, "I've been coaching for 15 years. This is the first time I've gotten a note from the front desk clerk at any hotel." He was just, and there was one more when they were leaving Toronto, and you have to go through customs, and J.R. Ryder's walking through, and the drug dog just is furiously barking at J.R. Ryder, like snarling at J.R. Ryder. And they pulled J.R. Ryder in customs because they just know he has drugs on him. And he had no drugs on him, but his tracksuit smelled so much like weed that the dog was let off and went crazy on him. So he's just my favorite character. He's such an endearing guy and actually a really nice guy who just, had a really tough upbringing and was kind of didn't trust everyone and had a real guard on him, but was kind of a delight at the same time. So I could talk J.R. Ryder the rest of my life and be pretty happy.
Jeff, just a follow-up on, you mentioned Phil Jackson, and, I think he's one of the most intriguing coaches in NBA history because of how he handles his teams and the part of the teams he's been a part of, not only playing with the Knicks, but to, coaching Chicago Bulls with Jordan, then to the Kobe and Shaq era. How hard would you say it is for players to mess up in Phil Jackson's coaching style? Because he's so laid back. You would have to do something totally boneheadish to really piss him off to say, I don't want to deal with you as a player because of the players he's dealt with in his past.
I have two thoughts on this. Number one, so Phil Jackson is in his 70s now. And it is really pathetic to be a Knicks fan when you think that the last time they won a title was when he was playing for them. Like, that's pretty rough. So maybe Knicks and Jets. And we both have jerk owners. I have Woody Johnson, who's like this big Trumpster, and you have
we got the Mr. Dolan himself. Yeah,
Holy
Mr.
cow.
Nightlife now.
Oh my God. Talk about a guy who wants to be a celebrity. It's interesting. The only way you could screw up with Phil, like, obviously he had Dennis Rodman and he made it work with Dennis Rodman when Dennis Rodman was out of his mind. But he was very good about, as long as you show up and play, you can be whatever you want, like this is time Dennis Rodman was, would come one day wearing a wedding dress and all right, as long as you play, that's cool. Dennis Rodman would show 20 minutes late. As long as you come and play, that's cool. Like, it was just come and play. The problems he had with Kobe is Kobe didn't really, Kobe was not a fan of the triangle, and the triangle was probably not a fan of Kobe. And there would be games when Kobe would be like, screw it, I'm just not doing this. And he would shoot 8 for 23 or, 6 for 19. And you'd look at the box score, and if you just look quick, you'd be like, oh, he scored 23 points. That was a fine. But he was shooting the team oftentimes. He could be a real disaster for that system. And toward that last year, 03-04, when the last year Shaq and Kobe were together, it got really bad to the point where Phil Jackson was like, I don't know if I can coach this guy anymore. And this is a guy who coached Dennis Rodman through the craziest of periods. But at least Dennis Rodman, when he was on the court, did exactly what he was supposed to do. And the one thing Phil Jackson could not abide by is a player deciding he knows better on the court. And that was the one time. Michael Jordan never did that. Michael Jordan, once he bought into the triangle, he bought into the triangle. But Kobe, it was always a battle. One thing that was tough with Kobe, as far as if you were coaching him, if you were playing like Toronto with Vince Carter, or Philly with Iverson, there was something inside of Kobe where he wanted to one-up the guy he was playing against. If it was a superstar on the other team who he viewed as a threat, there were nights, Vince Carter was one guy in particular where they'd be going in to play Toronto and the other players would be like, this is going to suck. Because you just knew he was going to, every time Vince Carter scored, he would want to come back and go right at him. And he used to drive Phil Jackson and a lot of the other players a little bit crazy.
I can see that.
Yeah. Jeff, let me ask you about one of the most prominent families in sports, the Buss family. What was it like dealing with them throughout this book process?
So I got to know Jeannie Buss pretty well from my first book about the Lakers and this book. She's probably my favorite owner in sports. Jeannie's a unique bird. She really is. Like, I teach, I'm like an adjunct professor at a really tiny college down here called Chapman University. And one time I reached out to Jeannie and I said, I know this is a long shot. Any chance you'd come speak to my class? This is the owner of the Los Angeles Lakers. This was a class of about 13 students, right? About an hour and a half away. Jeannie drives down. She calls me from her phone. She's like, I can't find the class. She's like running across campus, holding her shoes in her hand because they're like high heels to speak to 13 people. There's no gain for the Lakers. That's not going to help the Lakers going to a Chapman University class. She's just actually a decent human being. And when my first book, Showtime, came out, it wasn't a love letter to the Lakers. There were some things in that book that were not so positive about the Lakers. And she was like, I think you got this book right. I think you got it right. I appreciate that. This book, she sat down with me. She connected me with Phil Jackson, said, here's how you reach him. Let me reach him first. She's just a decent person. And I find that family, Jerry Buss definitely liked women who were very, very young, which sometimes was a little weird. But that family and her in particular, I don't have anything bad to say. I just think they're good people. Mm-hmm. They're the anti-James Dolans. I will say that.
I've heard the same. I had a couple friends who played with the Lakers, and they just speak, wonders about Jeannie and how it's like really a family. Once you're in the Laker family, it's really a family. Not like other teams where they say you're a family and they don't keep up with you after they trade you or something like that.
I do think it's funny how in sports, it's like, we're all family in here. And then the next day you're cut. And it's like, wait.
Yeah.
Families get
Cut my
cut too,
uncle.
man.
Yeah, I know.
Families get cut too.
I guess.
You never know.
Yeah.
Jeff, is there a particular sport that you tend to focus more on to cover, or is it just whatever idea or concept comes your way, you say, you know what, that's going to be my next venture?
I mean, I was a baseball writer at Sports Illustrated for a long time, but I would say my favorite athletes to write about is generally the NBA.
Thank you, because we have a lot of people in our contributors list who believe the NBA is not a focus compared to the NFL. So I'm glad you said that.
Oh, first of all, here's what I like about the NBA, for real. Number one, the players tend to have some college experience, which gives them at least a level of maturity just because they've had the experience of a little, even if you just had some time on a campus. I think it gives you like an exposure to something. And, you know, a lot of baseball, it's not going to make me that many friends, is super, super right wing and very, very conservative and not that open-minded. And I've just found personally the most open-minded people, athlete-wise, tend to be NBA players, you know, where they're like, they're willing to explore ideas and they're kind of, you can talk to them, and there's a certain, the diversity of the league is rich and kind of, I love that. And the experiences are rich and diverse. And I just always found baseball, as much as I enjoy baseball, it was almost like you'd walk into a baseball clubhouse and I'm actually being sincere about this. You'd go to walk into a baseball clubhouse, and I covered it for about 6 years. You'd have the white guys over here, the 3 or 4 Asian guys over here, maybe nowadays 2 or 3 African Americans over here, a couple of Dominican players here. And you would think it's diverse because you look in the dugout and it's diverse, but it doesn't feel it when you go inside of it. When you go to an NBA locker room, it's a fairly diverse world, but it feels like this. And like that, like the Laker teams I wrote about are actually a really good example. Like Shaq's closest friend on those teams in many ways was Mark Madsen. You know, like it just really feels like a we are the world place, the NBA. And I love that. Like I really sincerely love that. So I'd say the NBA is my favorite. And I feel like they're the smartest athletes. I feel like if you go, where do you meet the smartest athletes? It tends to be the NBA.
But going by your favorite players,
Yeah, we have
you
it.
definitely grew up a baseball player, baseball fan, I should say.
Wait, why?
Because a lot of your favorite players are baseball players.
Oh, yeah. I don't know. I could go any sport and tell you I have all like, depends on the sport, you know?
No, I was just saying growing up, you prefer like you watch.
Oh, when I was a kid.
Yeah.
But the thing is, you have to remember, growing up back in the day, the NBA was rarely on. I'm 48. It was hard to find, you know, and the NFL was Sundays, but baseball was every day. And I'd be sitting in front of and also every kid played Little League back in the day. It was like a thing you would do. And I would sit at home. And also I was growing up during the heyday of really good baseball in New York in the 86 Mets. So I'd be sitting in front of my TV with a mitt, doing this with my ball, you know, into the mitt. So that was those guys were my heroes back then. The other thing I will say about baseball, it was a much more diverse sport back in the day. And I loved, it sounds weird, I grew up in a very small, very conservative little town, Mahopac, New York. You know, my class was probably 5 Jewish kids, 2 African Americans, and the rest was white. And you'd be watching baseball, and you'd see like Joaquin Andujar or Omar Marino and Gary Templeton, and you'd see afros, and you'd see guys with lamb chop sideburns. And it was like, it really was for me, like this education on diversity when I was not growing up in a world like that. And it sparked my love of travel, sparked my love of sort of sports, sparked my love of interviewing different people. So I give baseball, old school baseball, a lot of credit for that.
Nice.
Yeah. Coach or Womack, any final questions for Jeff before we let him go?
Listen, Jeff, I got to ask you the real hard question here. Everybody's beating around the bush.
Okay.
This is the one.
I'm ready for it.
Is Delaware going to make the NCAA tournament this year? That's the big question.
Okay.
Now, I coached at St. Francis. We are one of this actually offline, I think somebody needs to make this just a bigger story. We are one of the final 4 teams to never make the NCAA tournament in the history of Division I. So you want to talk about being a fan?
It hurts.
We're Terriers.
Yes,
really,
I'm an alumni of that school class.
But every year, this is the year.
Yeah.
This is the year the Terriers make it. So I want to ask you: is Delaware making the NCAA tournament this year?
Wait, I'm going to tell you something interesting, and I'll answer that question. I was at Delaware 90 to 94, and I was the assistant sports editor of my student newspaper, the Delaware Review, when Delaware made its first ever NCAA tournament, right? It was 1992. It was, I remember, like, we beat Drexel to make it, win the conference. It was the best. We played in a small little field house. Place went crazy, okay? It's one of the great, it might be my best moment as a sports writer, as a sports journalist, that joy, that moment.
Mm-hmm.
We get Cincinnati in the first round, okay? And Cincinnati at this point, nobody knows that much about. It was Bob Huggins was the youngest coach at Cincinnati. This is Nick Van Exel, Corey Blount. We get Cincinnati. Delaware's a 14 seed. We get Cincinnati. Delaware has a starting front court that goes like 7-foot center, 6'8", 6'6". We have a great point guard named Brian Pearl. And we're like, Delaware, we're going to win this game. We're going to win this game. We go to the NCAA tournament, Dayton, Ohio. I'm sitting courtside because you get to cover it. Delaware's winning 6-2. It's like, oh my God, we're going to win. This is amazing. They put Nick Van Exel in off the bench. They start pressing. Cincinnati's press back then was preposterous.
Yeah.
Delaware loses by 39. It was insane, but it's still the most amazing, miraculous moment of my career. And I really, truly, truly, sincerely mean this from the bottom of my heart. I really hope you get to enjoy that this year.
I'm praying, man. I've been praying from since 2004.
Yes, we have, Coach.
2004.
We came close in 15. We came this close.
Yeah,
in
2015, we were about 3 points away from that.
Yeah, I was ready to storm the coast. So,
do you play Delaware this year?
We don't. As you know, due to COVID, a lot of the schedules are being changed as we speak because you got to play teams a little closer to your region. But I don't think we've ever played. I don't think we played Delaware for a long time. But I have friends who coach at Hofstra, so I'm very familiar, obviously, with the league. I follow Hofstra a lot, so I follow Delaware. I know you guys had a good team. I think last year you had a pretty decent team. Last season.
So their best player did something that is beyond. I don't want to criticize a 20-year-old kid, but he declared himself early for the NBA draft, and I don't know why. I don't know what he was thinking. Some agent probably gave him really bad advice or something, because there's no way this kid's getting drafted, and it kind of breaks my heart. And it also hurts Delaware's chances. So I would say probably not, but the program is definitely moving in a nice direction. So.
Beautiful campus too. So
beautiful. Newark, Delaware. You can't go wrong.
Yeah.
Well, I wish you luck.
Thank you.
I'll be rooting for you now. I really will. I promise you.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Anthony, any final question for Jeff?
Not a question. I just want to state something he stated earlier, which was what Jeannie said, and that you definitely got the book right. I loved it. And like I said, you went at Kobe pretty hard, but again, it was fair because it was true. And as somebody who also had to live, just like you said, with him in the triangle, just having to live with Kobe's shot selection, I live and die with it all my Laker life, as rooting for the team. So I just see it as it is what it is. I know it was a negative, but of course, when the shots dropped, it was a big positive. Yeah. So again, you just live with it. And again, great book.
Thank you.
I hope everybody picks it up.
I appreciate that. Also, you know what I always say is that I always think it's important. And I mean, Coach, you would know this too. Like, who someone is at 25 isn't who they are at 41. And that's kind of the point I'm trying to make. Like, this is a journey. Yeah. And this was his journey. And the person who died
in the beginning
with the 4 daughters, Academy Award winner, youth coach, he just wasn't the same guy at 25. And this is just a part of the journey. And it does not take away from someone the completion of someone's life to look at him when he was younger and say, these are the potholes he ran into, and this is how he handled it. So,
those were my favorite Laker years.
Oh yeah,
growing up, that was the prime. Those were my favorite years. So
I'm with you. Jeff, we call him the president of the Laker Nation Brooklyn division.
Nice.
On our show.
I didn't know there was a Brooklyn division.
Oh yeah. They have a Brooklyn division.
They do. That's him. But Jeff, any final thoughts, or just anything, just to tell the fans to why they should pick the book up? Anything you'd like to add? Just to
I can tell you, just it was a labor of love, and like I love those teams, and I love Kobe Bryant, and I love Shaquille O'Neal, and it was a joy to write. And I hope, honestly, people say, like, what do you hope people get out of this book? This is what I hope. 2020 is a terrible year. I don't know anyone from any political spectrum who has enjoyed this year. And if you can write a book and it takes people away and lets people enjoy the nostalgia of a really magical time, I don't care if you get the book from your library for free or borrow it from a friend or don't read it or read it. But I hope if you do, that you just get some, you get some much needed a break from the sort of awfulness of this year. That's good enough for me.
Oh, Jeff, I can't thank you enough for taking your time out of your busy day to come join us here on the Sports Hit List. I look forward to more of your work, especially that Bo Jackson one. Definitely sounds interesting to see how you go with that one. Do you possibly have a release year for that one yet, or is it still something that's relatively new?
Probably 2022 or something crazy like that. I'm early in it, so it's a while. Yeah,
that's great. Please make sure you like, share, comment, subscribe to the Sports Hit List by the fans and for the fans. Again, Jeff, thank you so much for coming on the show, and we look forward to more of your work. And go out and get the book, and take care.
Thank you so much.
We'll be back around here for that book.
Oh, and if you can do a Celtic book, that'd be greatly appreciated. I know that's a reach. That's a big reach, but it's something on Paul Pierce and that 1 year dynasty we had. I would love it.
There's a book coming out about that dynasty. There's a book coming out. I forgot who wrote it, but it's a big time writer. It's coming out soon. Yes.
Okay, so there we go. Because the last one I had was the book they did on Russell.
You guys are so needy, man. You got a guy 17 championships, 16 championships, asking for books. I got a guy who's never seen a championship, and y'all asking for more.
There is a book coming out about the Ewing Knicks also.
I don't want to read it.
I know.
It's gonna put me back into.
Listen, this is what I say though, Jeff. This is what I say. I've only been alive to see one championship from my team. Should I not still enjoy it until they win another one? Because I don't know when I'm going to get one. Like
I enjoy it. Of course, enjoy it.
I'm still enjoying 08. Why not? Right?
You know what? First of all, you got a Laker fan here and a Celtic fan here, and a Jet fan who's never had a Super Bowl, and a Knick fan whose owner is just Satan and hasn't won a championship since Phil Jackson was playing. We will give you no empathy or sympathy.
Thanks for watching the Sports Hit List. Be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. In fact, do it now.